Animation Lunchbox.
Today we are interviewing our life drawing teacher, first year life drawing teacher, Klaas Hart.
I teach second year as well.
Yeah. Some of us might be lucky enough to get you next year.
But variety is a good thing too. So.
True.
Yeah, to start it off, I guess we'll introduce ourselves again. So
Danielle Harmon.
Mark Adra.
Tyler Nardone.
Evan Perus.
Nico Powell.
You weren't sure there, right? And I guess
Dramatic
I'm
pause.
Klaas Hart, right? So
Yeah, you got that.
I'll introduce myself too.
Okay, so
Yeah, so I guess as like a really quick background, if you wanted to give us like a bit of a synopsis of your education, where you went to school, or basically how you got to the point you are now at Sheridan.
Sure. I mean, I think I've always been interested in creating one way or the other, and I think what initially really took me was when I would look at, what people had done, sort of feats of creativity, and sort of be in awe of it, and sort of wonder how could a human being possibly come up with that, right? And sort of how did that work? So I was very drawn to that, not necessarily to any one kind of, discipline or craft, and so I decided to go to art school and had a lot of different ideas. I had an uncle who was a graphic designer, and he offered me a job if I wanted to at the end of my training. But then I really got into kind of doing my own work, and so after being at OCA, that's where I studied. Kind of went on my own path, sort of towards painting and fine arts, and met up with a really, really key instructor for me there. This guy Glenn Priestley, who taught a lot, and after that, decided to pursue painting as a discipline. And
I was gonna say that's crazy, like to pursue painting, because I don't know, like why did you pursue painting?
I think I just enjoyed the process. I think I enjoyed working with color. I enjoyed pushing the medium around. I think I like the freedom of it. I think the idea of maybe being that young and going into an industry like graphic arts maybe seemed a little bit limiting. But in retrospect, I think what you guys have, the idea of actually coming out of an education with a possible career path, seems really tempting, because they don't teach you anything in art school about being a businessman, or at least, getting a job and that sort of thing. So, and then, because painting, can be good when it's working, but it's feast or famine. So, teaching became sort of a second option, really. And I found out that, I liked it, and I think I sort of found out that people seemed to like what I did, so I guess I was good at it.
That always helps.
Yeah, it does. Well, they always say teaching is partially what you know, but it's also how you interact and all that sort of thing. And my father was an academic, so he taught PhD level philosophy. So maybe there was something in there, right? Maybe some genes to some degree.
Just like through osmosis, kind of.
Exactly. Yeah. So I did a lot of private teaching, and then sort of worked my way into other, non-academic schools, and had been teaching for almost 15 years. Wow. And then actually Mark Thurman, who I've known for a long time, approached me because they needed a life drawing instructor here. And so then I got the first gig, and I think at that time Sheridan was moving from 4 classes into 5, and he was only going to take 4, so they needed somebody for the 5th. So I took that, and then the second year teacher who was teaching the extra cohort for second year wasn't coming back, and so I took that. And then as they kept on adding years, then I would keep on getting 2 gigs, and now I'm at my max. So so that's why I teach first and second year. So
So how many groups in second year do you teach?
2 as well.
2. Oh.
Yeah, so it's 2 and 2.
And life drawing, because it seems like you were more focused on painting. Like when they offered you the life drawing class, how did you feel about that?
I think it's actually, for the kind of painting that I do, it's almost a better fit, because in a sense, I would say the kind of painting that I do is more geared towards life drawing, because it is more process driven, and it's maybe more finite in a sense than the painting that is done here. And because, in my training, life drawing is the foundation, right? Yeah. And even anatomy. So I think that's sort of where you come from as whether you're drawing or painting the model. It's all about what we talk about, structure and process and that whole thing. So I think it probably would have been a bigger learning curve to figure out what painting for animation would have been like, as opposed to figure drawing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting too, just because you also have the background of life drawing, but then taking life drawing to build onto something else, like your paintings, or like
Yeah.
what else you can do with that knowledge to make it something else.
Absolutely, and
Yeah.
I think it's very transferable. I mean, I think that's maybe initially harder to move around. I mean, I was just talking with some of the other class in first year about that. How you can have life drawing, which can be very challenging, and then you might have another aspect of your work, your ability to develop character or something like that, and there initially might seem to be a big gap between the two, but I think when you become more comfortable with both, it's easier to close that gap, and then you can, like you're talking about, you can have those things merge and benefit each other.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I see a lot of those. I mean, they recently put up in the hallways some of the second year like costume stuff.
Yeah.
Where it's trying to bridge that gap. I feel like
Yeah.
into the caricatured or like that kind of system where you take your knowledge of life drawing and then like your creative aspect of trying to develop like a story, and then you get those two working together to create some fun illustrations.
Well, I think that's the ultimate goal with Sheridan figure drawing too, is not to just to draw an academic figure. We're not even, we don't think that that's an aim at all, but it's more about, understanding the model well enough to create a very quick shorthand drawing, so that when you get into third and fourth year, you can look at a model that's posing in a narrative, in costume, and you can sort of animate what's in front of you. That's kind of our goal,
Yeah.
And it's not, and I think that's a misconception sometimes for first and second year students, because we, do kind of run a tight ship and hold people to a fairly, narrow band of options that it sort of seems like there's one way to draw, but ultimately we're looking for people to, input their own creativity. We just think you have to,
Learn the
Right.
basics.
learn the
before you
basics
can-
first. Yeah, exactly.
It's
Yeah.
funny because like I took art funnies in VCA before getting into animation, and when I would like walk around the animation hallways, I would go down like by our end where they have like the very like life drawing parts, and then you would go around the corner like by where they had the third year film stuff, and you keep going, and like it's just some crazy stuff. And then I realized like way after, I was like, wait, that's a life drawing class. Like that doesn't
Yeah.
like life drawings. Yeah, it's really cool
Yeah.
that eventually it evolves into that.
Yeah, and I have to give credit to Mark Thurman. He's a real thinking machine, and he's been in the the sort of illustrative and animation world as part of his career, because he did a lot of publishing, and the two of us are constantly trying to look at the assignments and cater them towards this end goal, to try and make them more driven towards animation and less about just figure drawing in and of itself. So, like for
Right.
example, years ago, the skeleton test was just 3 skeletons lined up front, back, and side like a police lineup, right? Dead still, just sort of very, just show us a skeleton, and then we had this idea that you had to put it into a narrative, and that the narrative, they had to have an action, and then that action could potentially have an environment, and so it went from a very static drawing to something that was leaning towards animation.
Yeah.
And so we always review our assignments, and it helps keep it interesting for us too.
Yeah, I think
It can change. So.
I think even on our end, it might even motivate students more to like get the little nuances of the bones, because you see different things. I feel like when it's in a pose and it's part of a narrative, and it's like, oh, I really like the shape of this, of like the patella on this knee when he's making this pose, and it's
Right.
just, you get more into it, so you're more inspired to like remember that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like people find get more engaged in something when they were interested in it. Like like that you said, the police lineup and like different poses. It's pretty boring. Like,
Yeah.
People aren't that excited about it, but when we have this like really idea they're passionate about, they
Yeah.
really want to sell it and do a good job on the drawing.
Yeah. And I actually, to that point, going back to just teaching itself, I think that's a huge factor in teaching. I think it's sort of a teacher's responsibility to get the students excited. Apart from just delivering, the curriculum, I think you have to inspire them. I think the teachers that really, I responded to as a student were the ones that got me excited about what I was doing. And the ones that I didn't respond to were the ones who. Were just sort of a lump.
Boring.
It's interesting because faster poses, I think, like push you, and I find myself like looking into like life drawing. Like I've gotten a couple books, and I've like looked into other people's processes and how they approach it, and like it's like I don't know, it's the class like that you teach, and like the fact that you make it fun. I feel like I'm more like, yeah, I'm gonna go like see how other people who do life drawing or teach life drawing, how they approach it, and see if I can add that to like my stuff.
Right. Good.
So it's fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think too that, you always have to keep a focus on the process when we talk about this in class, right? Because you can only control so much of the outcome, right? And so if you're always attached to the outcome, you probably are going to get frustrated, right? Because we all want to do better, right? But if you just think about the process and kind of create a goal for yourself and make that, sort of the journey, like is the cliche, it's the journey, not the destination, right? So it's the same thing. If you just focus on the process and try and engage with that and let it land where it lands and just trust that in the long run you'll get better, that's a much better way to approach it than be hung up on results.
Yeah, I've heard a few times when referring to life drawing as like worrying less about like what your drawing's supposed to look like compared to other people's drawings, but more like drawing so that you can describe what's in front of you. Like, what is the model in front of you, what does it look like? What do these shapes look like? And thinking more about that rather than like, this is the kind of line weight that I'm supposed to have.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice. Like, you also said it to me, and also plenty of other students, like, just like, not every drawing is going to be perfect, like, don't worry about that, just draw, and like, you'll get some nice ones. And it really helps to, like, instead of sitting there worrying about, each drawing having to be perfect and good, and if it's not, then it's like a failure, when in reality, it's like, you just do as many as you can, and some are going to be bad, and some are going to be good.
Right.
Yeah. Definitely helps to loosen up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's that letting go.
Yeah.
Like letting go, like this needs to be perfect, and then I find once you relax and you don't put that stress, like that pressure on yourself and that stress, your drawings come out a lot better.
Yeah.
Sometimes I find that, like, if it's like a 3 or 5 minute pose, I'll do the first half of it just kind of not even really like thinking, and then I'll realize that it's coming out well, and then I'll get into the mindset.
You panic, yeah. Oh my God.
Ruin it.
You're obligated now. It's like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
If only you could maintain that sort of naivete throughout the drawing,
that
happens.
The blissful ignorance of drawing.
Yeah.
Right.
I never thought of it. That actually happens to me too.
Yeah.
Well, and also coming back to your work, because like at the zoo, I was just like drawing, and like a lot of the stuff I was like, oh, this is not good, and I just wasn't really like I was trying, but at the same time, it's hard to draw animals when they're like moving and swimming.
Yeah.
And so I didn't think I had any drawings, and then like I went back to composite the thing, and I was like, oh man, I actually like these. Like this is actually pretty good. Like the fact that when I was there, it was kind of like trying, I guess not trying hard, but like that pressure to draw them quick, and then like kind of being like, alright, I'll just draw like a whole bunch of them. Like I don't really care if this one doesn't work, I'll just move on and like just keep through it. And then I'm like, oh, I like this one. Oh, I like this one. Or you like different things about certain drawings than others. So I found that was really cool.
Yeah, I found that too when I'm assembling the life drawing portfolios. Like, I would be flipping through the pads and I'm seeing drawings I remember doing. Like, this actually is not too bad. And when I thought of like that day's drawing, I thought, oh, they're all terrible. And when I go back to it, it's like, oh, this doesn't too bad. It's a nice surprise.
You're your own worst critic.
Exactly. Yeah, your own worst critic.
There's actually a great quote. I'm not entirely can't remember who said it, but it goes that discontentment is the flame of creativity.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's the idea that, if we could do it perfectly, we might not repeat ourselves because the job would be done. And it's the fact that we've done it and it's not quite good enough that drives us to do it again.
Yeah.
And so if you think about that sort of, again, speaks to the process, right? And so if you enjoy the process, who cares about the outcome to some degree? But ironically, that's what leads you to the outcome.
Yeah.
I guess everything's a process though, like life.
Yeah.
Like you're never.
Oh, yeah.
I guess till you die, you're always changing. You're always like the outcome is not always what you're focused on. It's like how do we get there and like all that
Ideally.
kind of stuff. So.
And even if you do get there, you probably want something different.
Yeah. You're on to
after
the
that.
next thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I know, like in this class, I was looking through some portfolios, like some of my stuff for the portfolio life drawing, and I was like. Some of the stuff I was doing, I was like, oh my god, like, I would never imagine me ever being able to do something like this, like, at the beginning of the year. Like, do you see, growth really fast in first year?
I mean, it varies from student to student for sure, but I think on two counts, I mean, certainly if you were to take the first drawing session that you did in class and compare it to, like, not necessarily the last, but let's say your best of the second semester, absolutely you would see. But I also think what would be more critical is if you could get inside your head in that first week and see, how possibly terrifying it might be compared to getting in your head in the second semester, whether you're performing well that day or not, and just the fact that you're going in understanding construction, understanding shorthand, understanding, simplified forms, and just, again, whether it works or not, just the comfort of at least having the process to be able to hang your hat on. So.
Yeah, when I first started, like, life drawing, I mean, there's just a huge difference between like you were saying, the mindset, like because I knew, like, okay, I want to go to animation school, so I have to do this thing called life drawing. So I found somewhere to go and do that. but all those drawings are so you look back at them now and they're just hollow. It's like they're empty because it's just I didn't know anything, so I don't know form or like what I'm trying to look for. So it's just like I'm just like outlining the silhouette of like the figure. It's just like
That's
so.
the language, right? And it's like
Yeah.
when you learn any new language, your vocabulary is limited, and when you try and say something, you're usually pronouncing it wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So kind of in like a similar like vein, Klaas, what is like the difficulty ramp up from first year compared to second year?
I think to some degree the workload.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot more weight on learning new things. I think in first year we take you very consistently and not slowly, obviously, because it's a pretty big workload, but it's a fairly consistent, singular focus towards an end goal. Whereas in second year, you're getting a lot more thrown at you a lot more quickly. You know? So,
Okay.
you know,
That'll be fun.
There we go, guys.
yeah, like if you think about it, we give you sort of a whole semester to learn the skeleton. In the second class we're covering, the lower torso intensely, and we're expecting that, in that class you'll learn it and be able to draw it by the end of
class.
and then we go to the shoulder and you got to do the same thing. So it's, we're sort of expecting that what you learned in first year, you're carrying it into second year, and then you're adding to it, quite quickly. And there's a lot, like I said on the way here, there's a lot less time to sort of feel it out, and you're sort of having things thrown at you and say, okay, no, do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that I think is tough. And then there's a lot more variety, because you get into costume, you get into more animal drawing, you get into all the écrochet, which is the the muscle studies, and the exam is a lot harder. You have to learn a lot more. So yeah, I think it's a little bit more intense.
Yeah. Is there a different teaching approach between what you do in first year and then what you teach in second year?
Yeah, I mean, I think a teacher always has their own style, let's say. But I think the approach is different because you have to appreciate that a first year student's coming at it with less information, and a second year student is coming at it with more information.
Right.
And I find sometimes teaching second year is about taking what they learned in first year and try and make them feel a little less inhibited, and let them maybe more in the second semester, but kind of let them know that the way they think they need to draw maybe isn't necessarily true, and that they can let more of their own personality into the drawing. I think that becomes more important at that point.
Right.
So
finding your own voice in how to describe the model and the form.
And then after that, it grows and grows and grows. So third and fourth year are certainly almost exclusively about that.
Wow.
And a lot less hand holding.
Right.
Which some people like and some people are terrified of. So.
Yeah, the costumes like that. I'm kind of nervous about like doing costumes and stuff because it's like you start to have to take into consideration like drapery and like different like making sure like certain like fabrics come across as like heavier or lighter or like that kind of stuff. So like that's kind of like I guess one of the new learning curves you get as you go further.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, like even if look at the first year program, you could easily spend a couple more years just sorting it out, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And then within second year, let's say there are 5 topics, and any of those you could easily spend a year sorting out, but you have to do all 5 in 1 year, right? So it's kind of like that, right? So it's. Yeah. I think it's just the treadmill just keeps getting faster and faster. The heart rate increases.
We were actually just talking about if us around the table would be willing to like sacrifice 2 months of our summer if the year was a little bit longer. Do you think that like the way that it's structured right now, where it's kind of intense but it's built that way, works, or would you think it'd be a little bit more comfortable if there was a little bit more spaced out?
Well, I mean, certainly more practice helps, and having more time to practice. Certainly that's something that we struggle with a bit in second year because there isn't as much time because we're packing more in. And I think a student needs time to just kind of go in and fumble and make mistakes, and sometimes there isn't enough time for that because there's assignments and there's all these objectives. So I think certainly having that extra time would help. But there's also something to be said for like what you're talking about, just working through it on your own in the summer because you kind of have the information. And if you just sort of applied yourself, maybe gave yourself a little bit of a structure and attended, regular classes, you could do that, and you might not necessarily need, somebody standing over your shoulder the whole time.
Right.
Because sometimes that can be, a deterrent as well, right? Because you're sort of looking to that person to say whether it's working or not, and you're not necessarily developing your own kind of conviction about it, right? So
Yeah, that's probably. I mean, just relating the same. I guess once you get into third and fourth year, where there's less hand holding, and since it's so intense, and you have like the teachers to look for to be like, oh, is this wrong or is this right? I can see how that can be scary. Where it's just like oh, it's just do something. It's just like, well, what am I supposed to do? Yeah.
You find that students like who maybe did okay, like fine, were able to handle it in first year, maybe struggled a bit in second year, or just generally people are able to handle that increase of workload?
I would say in general there's a bigger learning curve in first year, and you see a lot more students really move through the grade levels a lot more quickly, and then in second year, you let's say you've got a certain percentage that sort of they're where they're at, and they maintain that. And then there is the odd student who really excels. They really take what they learn and they really run with it. But I think my feeling, and I don't teach all the other courses, but my feeling is that all the other courses get vamped up, right? So there's a lot of pressure coming from a lot of places, and it's tough to balance all that. And I think I get the feeling that second year students realize that they aren't going to, and they don't have to, be Uber in every class. You know what I mean? I think first years feel that. First year is so hard to get into the program, and then they want to do really, really well. But I was just talking to a third year student who looks back at his first year and how keen he was on doing really, really well in every class, and he burned out. And he actually had to take time off because he just went too hard. And then second year he kind of settled down, and you're not going to do as you're not going to be able to commit as much time. So so.
All the fourth years I've talked to and third years and that I know that I've talked to, they're like, oh, do you know what you want to focus on and specialize in? And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, there's no way when you get in further down the line, you have to pick what you want to focus on and get really well in, and then the other stuff is more back burner.
Yeah, pick your battles.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just like marriage, pick your battles.
Yeah.
When I talk to Enzo, he usually says that it's not one of the hardest things, the balancing act of what projects are you gonna sacrifice and maybe not put as much time into, and projects are you really gonna really step it up and put a lot of effort into.
Especially since we have 10 classes this semester.
Exactly. You gotta put that 110% in every single project. You'll burn out.
Not enough
time.
Literally, physically, not enough time to do that.
Yeah, that's the one thing I wish I had more of, especially for life drawing, is just more time to practice.
Yeah.
I mean, with all the other homework assignments, sometimes it gets a little hard. But
You can't put an extra life sometimes.
But it's interesting. I say sort of hats off to first year students, because as much as that is an impossible objective, it kind of creates a bit of an electric environment that's very contagious, and I think that people kind of thrive on each other, and because there is that level of kind of we got to go, and there's something special about first year in that regard, that it's fun to teach that way because the people are so keen and they're so willing to commit themselves and sacrifice themselves.
We were actually
well-being and
there's less apathy, and so
we were talking about it how we're given assignments and they're fairly simple assignments, but everybody wants to outdo the other person, so it just grows into this huge thing.
And then you have to find time to
I find everyone in this program is such a big not even they try to outdo each other, but everyone's basic ideas that I hear right at the beginning, they all sound over the top and crazy and that sounds so good, and then you're you get really excited about it, and you sit down and you're I have to do this now, or then you have to step back, but I just feel everyone's super ambitious in
I think it's partly in just getting into the program. I mean, this year we had I think 100 we take 150, and we had 945 applicants. So I think if you make it through that, right,
1 in
then
10.
You really feel you want to go for it, right?
Yeah, and you had to leaf through those portfolios. Oh, jeez.
Yeah, that's 1 in 10. That's scary.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
That's interesting. And on that topic, how hard is it to to really have drawings that stand out when you're flipping through so many and they all just blend kind of together?
I don't know that they blend together. I think the good work speaks for itself, but the portfolios it's a package deal.
Yeah.
And I think what we try and do, and I think we do well, is we assess the portfolio. So as a life drawing instructor, I assess life drawing, but I'm also assessing the portfolio. So
you do look at the whole.
Yeah, you look at the whole portfolio, and you do actually even score the portfolio for overall creativity and overall kind of how you feel about it. You only really score your own discipline, but because it goes through 4 different disciplines, and each each team is made up of 2 instructors, 8 people are seeing that.
Wow.
So it's a very, I think it's a very, balanced, perspective. I think it's a very honest assessment of the portfolio. And so, by the time it goes through that, even if, if it's strong in one area, a little weak in the other area, it does average out. So I do think, it's a good process that way. But,
I really like the fact that there's 2 people looking at one portfolio, because then if one person sees something that the other person doesn't, and you guys can kind of bounce back and forth, it's like, well, I really like this aspect of the drawing or something like that. But
and we do discuss it. I mean, a lot of times, sometimes you'll be on a portfolio and you'll be going back and forth and what about this and what about that.
Do you have the international students hand in that day too? Do you check theirs?
Yeah, they come in as well, but they're all mail-ins.
Right.
And so I would say they are probably even less than 1 in 10, just because it just seems like a lot of people. I don't know the number of mail-ins that we get, but it just seems there are a lot more mail-ins that people just sort of do it on a lark.
Okay.
It doesn't look like they really put any sincere
They just
effort
want to
into
see.
it. Yeah, or maybe their parents said they had to apply somewhere. So
you have to go to school.
If you get if you get a 1, it's not 2 is meeting, approaching the standard. 1 doesn't meet the standard. So it's a pretty. I mean, you guys would be able to tell right off the bat. That's true. It's just not ready. Not ready for the big league.
Right.
So.
What about interview? Because you guys went through an interview, and I remember when I was applying out of high school, that was one of the major pet peeves my art teachers had was they didn't have an interview, and they thought that interviews were important because sometimes the student might have a lot of potential, but someone has more of the drive to get there and is willing to work than the other student who is kind of more
I think that's logistical, strictly speaking. I mean, I think we would like to, but the idea of interviewing 45 students because they come in that day and then they drop off and then they pick up that day, and we've already got because for every one of those disciplines that I talked about, we actually have 3 sets of faculty doing it. So it's not 8 people, it's 24, and then we have a whole crew of students who are moving the portfolios around and doing it. So it would just be a logistical nightmare. I mean, even doing a drawing test would be great too, right?
Yeah,
but
that's true.
That's tough. You can't really.
It's hard to do that on a large scale.
Yeah, but now that you've mentioned that, especially seeing how much we have a lot of work, but I'm sure you guys have a lot of work. I know Blair does 9 kajillion things other than just here, and so that's how heavy it is here. You guys only have 1 week for portfolios. It's I can understand now.
It's a lot of marking.
Plus marking our stuff on top of that too.
Yeah, do you get enough time for your own projects, your painting, aside from all the stuff you have to do for the school?
See, you get less and less. There was a time when I was teaching, before I really was teaching a lot here, I was teaching privately more. And because I didn't have to mark, I had more time. So I was more capable of balancing off, the painting career and the teaching career. But then when I started working here, it was sort of more, I don't know, half and half or what have you. But I've kind of gotten into the mindset where it's almost, you need blocks of time to be creative. It's very it's very difficult, to be creative at Tuesday at 2:00 until 4:30. Creativity doesn't flow like that. So I get what I can done during the academic year, and then I try and get more of it done in the summer, and that sort of thing.
So you teach on top of you teach privately on top of
in the summertime, just to eat.
True, food is
and and I sell paintings too, so that helps. But you can't predict that, right? So that's it's nice
a lot
when
more.
you do feast and famine.
Would you teach painting here if you got it offered?
I actually did. I did have it offered when we shuffled some faculty around. That came up, and because they knew that I had done painting in the past. But Mark and I had been working for a number of years really closely together, and I've put a lot into that, and he's put a lot into it, and so it sort of felt like, that was my place. And if I kind of felt that if I had left life drawing, it would be harder to fill that role well than it would be to fill the painting role well. I'm not saying that painting is a lesser discipline, but it's just we had put so much work into the life drawing aspect, and so I was actually the one who found Florian. I know Florian for a while now, and he'd been doing a lot of teaching, so I recommended him, and they ended up hiring him.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So,
I can see that though, because just on the basis that life drawing really affects every aspect of all the other classes, I find is it helps everything. I mean, it helps your animation immensely if you do that more often, and then
Character design, posing.
Character, like just
Even
being able to observe and draw, like it just sharpens everything else.
Yeah.
And like you said, not to mention the rapport you and Mark have and that relationship working together to build
Yeah.
that life drawing program.
And I think that's part of it. I mean, I know that everybody in life drawing, because that's who I have most communication with. I mean, everybody in the whole program, but I more specifically in life drawing, they're very dedicated to the program, and they, it's not just a matter of showing up and collecting a paycheck. I mean, we believe in what's happening at the school, and the way we cater, what control we have over the program is all about making it a better program and making it interesting for the students and getting them to learn, or you guys to learn. I mean, that's it's part of the process, right? So.
And I remember you told me one class, and it was like something I never thought of before. And then once you like just said it, like a lot of stuff started clicking. Was that I had drawn like a model, and one leg was pretty good, and the other leg was pretty bad. But they had basically the same amount of line work on each. And you said like it's not about yes, it's about structure, but it's not about detail. And you said like this one's got a lot of detail in it or something, but like it just doesn't work. And you said you compared it to a poem where you said like poems have structure and it makes them good. Like a good structured poem is amazing, but it has nothing to do with the amount of detail in it.
Right.
And like that like all of a sudden I just started thinking about it, and that actually like started clicking with a lot of stuff I was doing.
Yeah, and that's a good example, because as a teacher, that's going back to that, not only inspiring somebody, but it's about communicating, and it's about not necessarily showing them something, but getting them to open up their mind to see something, because you have to be aware when you're drawing, right? And so if you can somehow convey a piece of information that could be helpful, sort of like a clue on a map, that would allow you to go in a certain direction, and with conviction,
right?
That's what you're trying to do.
No, I think that's a great way of illustrating the point, because especially if you're not getting it with life drawing, it's just like it doesn't make sense to me right now. Like being able to compare it to something else, then like you were saying, just unlocks it. It's like, oh, that makes so much sense now, because I can see how that like analogy works.
Yeah. Well, say more with less, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I find the language of life drawing, that like learning that like and how to teach someone, I think that would be very hard. And I think you teach it really well. And like Brian, he teaches third year, right? Second. I did a course with him, and like it's really interesting because you guys have a really good way of like explaining it, and it like I have not, like in Fundies and VCA, those teachers, I don't know, like I just didn't think they had, no offense, they're good teachers, but I just feel like they're, whether like you just like you communicate more with us or whatever it is, but like you explain stuff well, like the way you explain it, it allows it to like click, I find.
It's an important thing.
Yeah.
But I also think it's passion too, because I know Brian himself too, like we talk about this as when we have life drawing meeting, you fall in love with the process and the language and the whole thing of life drawing, and it's a beautiful thing, right? And so you want to share that, right? It's just like you've discovered something and you have a certain perspective on it. It's just like, I got but luckily for us, we have 100 people to share it with. So every year, right? And the new ones, new faces every year too, right? So that keeps it interesting.
It's awesome.
Do you think that like in high school they don't do a lot of like life drawing stuff? Do you think that they should open that up more to high school kids?
I had life drawing in my high school, oddly enough. I think the nudity has
I went to an arts high school, so like we did it, but we had the models like where like they were wearing
tights or whatever.
Like underwear, like whatever. So they weren't fully nude, but like
So. We did actually, but the room was like this like mysterious third floor, and you could only take it in like a grade 11, right? It was like, but yeah, I mean, I think more to the point, what it is observational drawing. Mm-hmm. You have to draw observationally, and I think there's a big difference between working from reference and working observationally, and even just from the way the brain interprets things. It's a very different process. Mm-hmm. And so if you are observing from life almost anything, there's a different challenge at work, and you're developing a different part of your brain than when you just look at a two-dimensional image, because it's already, a lot of the problems are already solved on a page, right? Mm-hmm. And especially if you're copying another person's work, they've already sorted out a lot of the issues for you.
Right.
And so so it would be good to do life drawing, but again, if you think about it, you have all these students who are really just learning in high school, and then all of a sudden you throw a portrait at them. So you might start with a coffee mug and sort of work your way up, right?
Or
I
like
think that's
cafe sketches and stuff like that too.
Yeah, well, looser sketches, sure,
Right.
that would be good. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, on that point, as like a nice closer, is that something really good to do during the summer to stay sharp? As just like when you don't have all these free life drawing classes at school, like if you go back home or something like that, just a lot of observational stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Observational drawing. I think perspective is another good one. Learning how to ground things in space. I know Peter Belitsky, who's a great layout teacher. He's really big into that whole idea of just being able to take almost anything and put it in a picture plane, as opposed to just having it flat on the page.
Right.
And so so cafe sketches, subway sketches are great, because you're always getting a new,
Right. Yeah.
a new, group of people.
Walmart.
Walmart.
People of Walmart.
Yeah, a lot of volume there. But yeah, I mean, any observational drawing. So.
Yeah. Anything like that.
Yeah.
Oh right, yeah. So usually when we have a guest on the show, we get them to draw a shape,
Okay.
and we scan it in, we put it on the podcast, and our viewers will make a character out of it or create something from it. So we're just gonna get you to
Any random shape.
any
Yeah.
random shape,
Any random
Yeah.
shape.
Get you a.
then we'll get you
Creative freedom.
Now I feel like I'm on this. I feel like the third and fourth year student. Oh my god!
It's your drawing test.
Do you have a preference in drawing material?
Something pencil cramming.
Yeah.
Might have to have it in my pocket.
Yeah.
I do. I have.
Should just,
Oh,
grab
okay.
it
I have
and
to.
grab it after.
Yeah.
I
Alright.
have to with myself.
Look at that. Always ready to draw. Oh, I have one of those, but not on me. Sorry.
Alrighty, yeah.
I have no idea what to do.
Oh, you're good to
Ooh, challenge is on.
So are we allowed to start using those next year, or?
go.
Till end of second semester.
Oh.
we sort of still want to hold you to the content. And
As long as possible.
that's right. It's a tough medium
Oh,
too.
as you draw, why Conte? Like, why do you think Conte is so?
Because
that's-
it's bold.
It's interesting.
Because it doesn't smudge, and because it's difficult.
Yeah.
So the idea is that if you can draw with Conte, you can almost draw with anything. And the fact that it is bold makes people, for the most part, draw gutsy drawings. There are still some people who still seem to whisper on the page, but
Right.
for the most part, it forces you to draw
Yeah.
pretty dark. And it's pretty versatile. I mean, you can get a lot of different kind of line qualities
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah.
So, and it does flow nicely. So, but it's a tricky medium for sure.
Yeah. It's interesting that it's developed as like that's just when you go life drawing, it's what you have. It's like across the board with like everywhere you go. It's like use Conte.
Yeah.
It's just pretty incredible.
That's cool. I was always curious why their teacher was like, don't use Conte, use Conte. I was like, why?
All right, Daniel.
All right. So that's all for today. Thank you, Klaus, for
Very
coming.
welcome. It was
Yeah.
enjoyable.
Yeah. Hopefully we can have you back. You're a good person to interview.
Nice.
So
Yeah,
It's
it was a lot of fun.
Anytime.
thanks for listening to the
Animation
Lunchbox.
Lunchbox.
Yay.